everyone. My name is Dan Kopp, and I'm coming to you live from Madison, Wisconsin. And joining me, like always, is Ty Fershing. Good morning, Ty.
Good morning, Dan. I'm coming to you from, as usual, Entebbe, Uganda. That's right, I'm in Africa, in case you don't know where that is. Anyway, I always say that because Africa has a tendency, especially Uganda, to have power outages here and there, especially during rainy season, which it is right now. So if that happens, I'll turn on the reserves. I'll be back on. In the meantime, Dan will take the reins and run with it.
If it happens, I'll try to be as intelligent as Ty is and not lose any of our audience because, I'll sit here drooling on myself. Anyway, before we get into today's topic, how great leaders prioritize, want to remind you, you can always contact Ty or me on LinkedIn, DM us if you'd like to work with us, and you can also reach out directly to us, Dan at leadingbuffalo.com and Ty at Trade Secrets. If you'd like to check out this video and other videos, you can jump over on our YouTube channel, Enhanced Leadership, and check them out there. So today's topic came out of a discussion we had a couple weeks ago. And we thought, there's a topic for future discussion, and it's how great leaders prioritize. So to start it off today, Ty, take it away.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it. So as Dan mentioned, we talked about some stuff, some good stuff a couple weeks ago. And one of the things that came up through it was the difference between important and urgent. And Dan put it very succinctly. He said, everything that's urgent is important, but not all things that are important are urgent. And from that, we came up with, well, this is what great leaders do. And how do they do it? How do they prioritize what's important and what's urgent? And when you think about prioritization, it's more than just saying, okay, this is important, that's urgent, this is important. It's more than managing situations and understanding what's important and what's urgent, and managing people and understanding what's important and what's urgent. So from my lens, from active personal engagement lens, I find that it comes from making sure you're making the decision based on all available information, including what's going on around you, how it's affecting you personally, how it's affecting your values, your organizational values. And then you make a decision based on that. And that's how you lead. But what makes it urgent and what makes it important? Well, Dan, I'm going to let you kind of go into that because I have my own ideas. And so we'll see if we sync up somewhere along the lines.
Urgent things, in my mind, I think of urgency as obviously not good, but more emergency-like. So it is urgent that we address the issue in front of us because production's stopped right now. We're creating widgets. We work in a factory and production is stopped. It's rather urgent, presumably, to get that fixed. Versus, hey, we've done sort of an evaluation of the product and we used to be at 97% in regard to quality assurance, and now we're at 94.3% consistently for the last 2 weeks. That's very important to address that and figure out why to go from 97 to 94.3. But is it urgent where you stop everything else that you're doing and fix that? So there, in a nutshell, is the difference between those two. When we, again, Ty and I don't script these, and during the introduction, I thought of something that occurred years ago. And as you're aware, I used to be in education, and I've learned from another administrator that when you're talking to an educator, like your teacher, here I'm a principal, I'm a superintendent, I'm talking to a teacher, their time is valuable, not unlike everybody else's time, right? But their time is valuable. So unless it's one of the ABCs, don't interrupt that time. So if you've got a scheduled meeting, go to it. If you're in a meeting with a teacher, be there unless it's one of the ABCs. So Ty's looking at me, what are the ABCs? Well, in an education world, it's angry parents, blood, or cops. In a civilian world, in a business world, I talk about angry employees, angry clients, angry customers, or blood, somebody's hurt, that's urgent, or cops. So the last two are the same. I just changed the first one. So unless it's one of the ABCs, through the lens of taking care of people, Ty and I are talking, we work together. I'm focused on what he's saying. We're in the moment. I'm not going to be interrupted unless it's one of the ABCs because the urgency is not there. Whoever's interrupting me might think it's important. I agree. It is important. If they're interrupting me, it's important. But is it urgent? Unless it's one of the ABCs, it can wait until I'm done talking to Ty. So in a nutshell, that's how I approach prioritization in my mind. Is it one of the ABCs? No. Is it an emergency? Then I need to address it right now. That's in a nutshell, very big picture, how I look at things.
Yeah, I think I don't know what you're referring to, but I remember. I wish you had the clip of the football game because that's a perfect example of how to prioritize. And maybe sometime we can revisit that, and you'll have the clip at the ready, and we can show it.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to go into it too deeply, but Dan had to make as the area administrator. Were you an area administrator this time?
Just school district. Yeah.
Okay, and he had to make a decision based on something that happened at a football game. Don't want to go into it too long because we'll take up too much of our time. But it's a perfect idea of where these ABCs come from. Is somebody dead? Did somebody get hurt? Are the cops involved? And the first one, which was what, Dan? What's your A?
Anger. Whether it's an angry client, customer, maybe it's a supplier, maybe it's somebody, whatever. If you got anger involved, go put that fire out.
So, there's a couple things I like what you said, and I'm just going to add on to it because a lot of times what determines if it's urgent or important is external as well. It can be a deadline imposed by a customer or a provider or a supplier or just a deadline in general. For instance, if I have two things that I know need to be done, one needs to be done tomorrow, one needs to be done a week from tomorrow. That really elevates tomorrow to being urgent because we're going to stop, right? And the perfect thing I tell people, because this is the perfect time of year, it's December. People are setting their goals for 2025. Okay, if you wait till midnight, December 31st, and you haven't finished your goals yet, you're late. And there's no way you can set your goals for 2025 because it's already started. You are late. Okay, so as we get closer to midnight, December 31st, that whole idea, if you are one of those people that set goals, that whole idea is getting more and more urgent as time gets closer and closer or dwindles down. So time is a big factor. And I do a lot of time management training within the leadership realm because there's two aspects of time management. One is like, I need to manage my time correctly. But as a leader, you need to manage everybody's time correctly. And that's we were talking about in our last thing, when does a leader manage? That's when a leader manages, when it comes to time. Okay, so you have to deal with time, and if someone's hurt, it's urgent. If you have deadlines, again, that's influenced by time. There's so many things that become urgent as influenced by time. Whether it's influenced by time or not doesn't not make it urgent. It's urgent if it's deemed urgent by I like the ABCs. That works for me. It makes sense. Me, my ABCs are: it has to be done today. B, it can be done today or tomorrow. Or C, somewhere later on or later in the week. Those are my ABCs. And how do I prioritize it? Yeah, so this is important because we have a customer that's not doing the right thing. We have an employee that these two are going to draw knives on each other. I don't know. They're in the lunchroom. I don't know. I don't know why they're carrying knives. It just came to my head. They're going to come to blows. There we go. So you have all these things that you have to be aware of. And a lot of times as the CEO, you're not aware of all these little intricacies that are going on. So you have to impart this information to your whoever is beneath you directly so they can impart it to everybody else, because this is a whole organizational structure and philosophy that you have to deal with. And again, for me, if you have a foundational approach to your leadership, you have that taken care of at the get-go. But if you don't, there's some lack of communication there. And to me, communication is always an urgent priority. You communicate what's going on, even if you're not going to address the situation, because that way people doesn't he care what's going on, and questions start flying back and forth. Dan, I see you smiling, so it must have triggered a memory.
Yeah, communication's key in everything a leader does, and in what a manager does, quite honestly. But you made me think of something that I use an example where I had two of my senior executives have a very negative interaction in front of me and 20 or 30 other people. And had it not stopped, that would have been urgent. I would have had to stop it, put a stop to it right then and there, right? But it was over almost as quickly as it had started. And was it important that I address that? Absolutely. But it was after 7 o'clock at night. I didn't know what to do. They were obviously heated. The whole emotion thing, I wanted everybody to calm down a little bit before I addressed it. So I addressed it the next morning because it was very important that I address it, but the urgency was not there to address it right at the time it occurred because it was over. They started a verbal altercation. It ended. They went their separate ways and it was done. There was no need for me to call them back, retreat to your neutral corners type thing and let's get back here. No, it was over. It can wait till tomorrow, but I addressed that first thing in the morning. So there was an example of how it was very important that I did it. It just wasn't urgent because they stopped it themselves. I offhandedly used the word putting out fire when I was the last time I spoke. I want to tell another thing I learned way back in the day. Let's picture an organization that has 3 levels of leaders. You've got your first level supervisor, your mid-level managers, and your executive people. When you think of fires, and this works for me all the time, your first level supervisors, they've got fires they need to put out by the end of the day. They're in the trenches, they're doing the work, they're with the people, and they've got things that need to be addressed today. There's the urgency inherent with their position. Mid-level managers typically have things that are important and urgent, but they need to be done no later than the end of the week. All right, this week I need to get this task done, whether it's quarterly evaluations, whatever. You've got to get it done this week, period. Yeah. Executive level leaders have things that are maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 months down the road. Budgets come to mind. If you're if you're responsible for budget, those are a yearly cycle typically. So you've got to build your budget. Well, if it's due, let's assume your fiscal year is the calendar year, using Ty's scenario, you're not going to wait until December 31st to submit to finalize the budget that's going to go into effect within 24 hours. You're probably working on that thing in September, if not earlier. The key that you have if you're an executive level leadership with those important tasks that you're doing is to not put them off. Because if you put off that long range fire that's a slow burn and you've got 6 months to get this done and you wait 5.5 months to actually start doing it, all of a sudden you've got a fire that needs to be put out immediately. And it's gone from I've got something to do with the luxury of time on my side versus it's now urgent because I've ignored it for 5.5 months. So there's the difference. In base level leaders, they've got fires they need to be addressed at the end of the day. Mid level by the end of the week. Executive level sometime in the future, whether it's months, next quarter, the end of the fiscal year, whatever.
Yeah, you reminded me of something because we're talking about something that is imposing urgency, and that's time, right? The process has been in the company for every year. Every year, you have a budget, but time, again, you let it slip, you put it off till tomorrow. And I don't want to go back into time management, but there are instances where time is where organizations are sometimes influenced by external factors, like I mentioned. And one that comes to mind is, man, it was years ago. I hope I can remember it. It was when Bill Gates there was an antitrust suit, or the IRS was coming after Bill Gates for some reason. They wanted something to do with Microsoft Windows. I don't know if it was they thought it was keeping too much information because everybody was using Microsoft Windows at the time, all the government institutions. But the IRS was he was being fined, I don't know if it was by the DOJ or the IRS, $1 million a day until he got the information that they requested. And there's a problem with that first of all, there's so many problems with that, but my problem with that is to Bill Gates at that time. He was the richest man in the world, I believe, at that point, and $1 million a day. He got that in interest off of like a quarter of what he was worth. So it really wasn't a big deal. He was fine, and he let it go on. He goes, "I'm not submitting until I'm submitting everything correctly." So even though he was being externally pressurized, this is urgent. To him, it was important. Because if it was urgent, he would have done it within that first 2 days, right? But it's important. We'll get it done. But he had that affordability to be able to do that. And what I'm trying to get, the point I'm trying to get that is that just because someone tells you it's urgent, you need to hold, as a leader, hold true to your values, hold true to your organizational values, take care of your people, because you don't want to make a mistake and damage anything within your organization because you're being externally pressured. Oh, this is urgent.
Right.
You have to call on the spot. So.
Right. Years ago, when I was a mid-level manager, I put into the position, had never done a budget for a department before. So I remember doing it the first year, did it well, etc. Well, I put on my calendar for the following year, don't stress out. This is easy. Follow these steps. So like 4 months before it was due the following year, that pops up on my calendar. I look at it, did it. And I knew my boss had to compile the overall organizational budget, and he couldn't wait until the day before the end of the fiscal year, right? So I thought, well, I'm going to get it to him early enough, so I don't want to be the one who's causing the problem in regard to meeting deadlines. So I'm like, here's my stuff. If you've got the luxury of now of compiling it. So I sent it in. He immediately replied, said, Dan, do you want to hold on to this until I actually ask for it? I'm like, okay. I was like a month early. Whatever. I was ready to roll because I had my budget done. But there's me not waiting on that fire to get right up close and all of a sudden it's urgent. I don't want urgency. I want to get something important done and get it off my task list and get the management done so I can go lead. And he wasn't ready for it yet because he was still in spending the current year budget mode versus building next year's budget mode.
Yes. Yeah, that's, you had the wherewithal and the foresight and the vision to see that. And that's what makes up a leader, right? Yeah. You have those three components. You go, okay, wait a minute. Let's see what's going on. It's urgent because I don't want it to be a fire, ablaze, right? And so that made it urgent to you. And you actually achieved personal, you're like, okay, it's done. It's out of the way. Because if you waited, it's a catastrophe, really, in the business world.
Yeah, it would have been in the back of my mind. I would have been stressed about not being the one who caused the whole process to come to a stop. Like it just got it off my shoulders. And all right, it's sitting here as a draft in my email. So when you ask for it, I will hit send, and you'll have it within 30 seconds of asking for it. So it huge stress off out of my head because I got it done. I hate to keep bringing up education experiences, but we had a situation where I had a brand new associate principal working for me as principal, and we had a drug issue that we were working through. And we had like 8 kids we had to interview because of this drug issue. And it was like 3:00. And we talked to Juan, he and my new associates taking notes, doing stuff on the computer, and basically taking his notes and putting them in the computer for the official record. And I said, we've got 24 hours in every day. We can use them all. The other 7 kids, we've got 25 minutes to talk to them before they're leaving school or getting on the bus. So we need to put that aside and prioritize based on, we have access to these kids for 25 more minutes. And he brings that, we're still friends and partners. And he brings that up occasionally and about how that one quick conversation we had when he was a brand new administrator helps him to this day because he learned how to prioritize and realize, all right, what are the moving pieces? Going back to what you said, time's an external factor that oftentimes dictates the urgency or lack thereof. He prioritizes based on time. What can I get done? Who do I have access to right now that I need? Where this other stuff can wait until after I have that face-to-face with the person. So it goes back to time, goes out back to external factors, but there are nuances in prioritizing, and it's realizing the relative importance along with the external factors that could affect the placement in your list of to-dos.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why it's so important to have that foundation underneath that internal part of your organization, or of yourself, of your leadership philosophy. Because if you have that already set, it's easier to like synthesize everything else that's going all around, like coming up. That's great. I agree totally. That's an awesome situation. You know, in normal organizations or larger organizations that I've worked with, that whole issue would have been just sent to HR, and HR would have handled it, you know, like that.
Right.
But you don't have that
Right.
in the education world, which I don't think people understand that in the education world, that administrators and teachers have to take care of everything, because there's, you know, very rarely do you get the latitude of go, well, let's call risk management and see how they view it. You have to handle it on the spot, baby. You know.
Right.
So.
It definitely helps with the leadership skill set. Like when you've got all these things coming at you, like I remember when I first became an administrator, I had a veteran principal saying to me, "Congratulations, your life just turned into 45-second increments." Because every 45 seconds, you're getting a different email, different phone call, somebody else approaching you in the hallway. And it's just, all right, prioritize all these different things that are coming at you and get them done is what it amounts to.
Yeah, I agree, because, you know, even in the military, you and I both being military police officers, we had the same thing. Every moment. There was no such thing as a routine day.
Correct.
You know, if you did a routine day, you have a good chance of being hurt. You had to be alert and aware all the time, and you had to make a decision based on everything around you on the spot. You didn't have well, what do I do? You know, you don't get on the radio and go, what do I do? You know, you have to do it, and then, you know, more often than not, it was the right decision because of the training we've gone through and experiences. Right. Yeah. So anyway, that's it. That's the difference, right?
There you go. So hopefully those of you who are watching this, you've learned a little bit about how to prioritize and think about your position in the organization and what is urgent versus what is important. Again, everything that's urgent is important, but everything that's important is urgent. So when do you address what? First level manager, put that fire up by the end of the day, middle level by the end of the week, and your executive level, don't let it become urgent by sitting on your laurels and ignoring it for 5.5 of your 6-month window. Start working on it, get it done, get it behind you, and everybody will rest easy at night. So I'm Dan, that's Ty. We are talking enhanced leadership, and you can do it. Good luck.
Take care, everyone.